This is Peyton Jones with Church Planter Magazine, and I am here with Brad Brisco and Lance Ford, authors, both of them, and it is good to be here with you guys. They are the face behind Centralized. They are also part of Missio Publishing, and guys, good to have you today.
Yeah, good to be with you, Peyton.
Yeah, great to be here.
All right. So tell me, tell me a little bit about your story. Briefly how you came to Christ, and then how you ended up in ministry together.
Sure. Well, I'll start. Lance and I actually both live in Kansas City. I didn't actually become a believer until I was 32, a little later in life. I was in the restaurant business and hired a young guy that was a believer. And over about a year's time, he's just kind of sharing with me the story of Jesus and made a decision to follow Christ. Actually, I was early 30s and sold the business, went to seminary, did some teaching, and now really focus on church planting. Been involved in church planting for about 17 years. In Kansas City, I work with a network of churches as what's called a church planting catalyst. So we work with planters kind of all across the city. And then Lance and I do some writing together. And then as you mentioned, we do the conference every year in Kansas City called Centralized. We're actually doing it again in Costa Mesa this January. And then we also give leadership to what's called a Forge Hub in Kansas City, which is kind of a training network for church planters and also existing churches.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, me and myself grew up in the church, but around teenage years did that kind of teenage guy thing where it's all about football and girls, and then shortly after my 19th birthday, really had a prodigal-like return to the Lord, and then it was never looked back after that, and really went straight into Bible college, and then years later seminary, but straight into youth ministry and things like that. So yeah, about 30 years now, raised our kids in church planting, empty nesters now, and we got to a place where about 3 years ago, my wife and I were kind of like, well, let's do something different, when the kids all left home, and so we came over to Kansas City from St. Louis, where we'd planted and pastored for about 12, 13 years. And Brad and I started a local network working with existing churches and church planters there, kind of around the missional ethos, with the church planters that are trying to, plant out of the ethos, and then existing churches that are just trying to inject more the DNA ideology and concepts and livability of missional formation for their folks. So
it's awesome. So you guys are both kind of like Paul's, kind of training Timothy's, and I know you're probably reluctant to, but that's how I see it, right?
We'll take that, but it's probably not.
You're veterans. You've put some time in.
Yeah, it's not. We've had a few rodeos. So.
Goat rodeos, albeit, right?
Absolutely.
But both of you write prolifically. I know. I first came across Brad online. He had a brilliant article that we were like, we got to steal this from the magazine, and Brad was like, hey, I got to update this thing. But it was one of the best overviews of the missional movement, defining it, overview. It was absolutely brilliant, and I think that article does need to be rewritten. Not because it needs to. I think it's great as it is, but we were just talking about Brad's very thorough and loves to have things boom. But it was such a great overview. If you can grab hold of that online, now that I'm promoting it, right? Brad's going to rush to rewrite it. But you've both written very Lance. You got a book we want to talk about in a minute here. What are some of the other books have you written?
The first one was Right Here, Right Now, Everyday Mission for Everyday People. That was with Alan Hirsch. And then after that was Unleader, I think, which really deals with leadership concepts, obviously. So it's a full-on different twist of leadership and kind of a call, kind of a prophetic call for, hey, let's kind of change where we're leading from and where we're leading towards. So. And then Brad and I did Missional Essentials, which is really a handbook, kind of a small group or a group handbook that's really starting to be used pretty widely. And
I love that cover.
Yeah.
That's a hot cover.
I hated that cover. I still hate that cover. I call it Skeletor, but
that's why I like it.
I know my mother-in-law liked it. I couldn't believe it. But I kind of got talked off the ledge.
It definitely catches your attention.
You don't forget it.
Yeah.
So my wife liked it. Yeah. So anyway.
And Brad's sitting there going, "See?
Yeah, I know.
I told you.
It was a huge issue for me.
Covers are a big issue. Everybody reads my book and goes, "Churches are."
Yeah. Well, on leader, everybody went, UN leader. Why would we want to be one of those? So it is crazy about.
That's awesome, Brad. What about you, man?
Well, really, like Lance said, Missional Essentials is the curriculum, and then the new book, Missional Quest. And then really over the last several years, just writing on the blog, which is primarily, I started that probably 6 or 7 years ago as kind of a clearinghouse for a doctoral project I was doing on helping existing congregations transition in missional direction. So I just kind of used that to, as I was researching, to a place, like I said, kind of a clearinghouse of the research. So.
You bring up a really good point, and I think a lot of people need to understand that when you're a church planter, you have a heart for non-believers. Obviously, you also have a heart for the church.
Sure.
So part of that, wanting the church, the existing church, also to take and harness these principles that we gain as church planters. That's also part of the passion. I think it's part of the apostolic gene too. It's just part of what you mentioned being a catalyst. Sure. It's part of catalyzing the body of Christ. Let's talk about the missional quest. The subtitle of this is Becoming a Church of the Long Run. What do you guys mean by that?
Well, I'd say the book overall, again, is about transitioning existing congregations and really starting with what we talk about as theological foundations as being kind of the root, that any change that takes place in the church needs to be rooted in some theological foundations, or we argue that change just isn't sustainable. So when you start to make change, people say, hey, why did we stop doing this and start doing this? Well, if it's rooted, if they understand, it's because of the missionary nature of God in the church, or it's because we need to participate in what God's already doing in his mission, they still might not like it, but at least they can understand why we're making the changes that are necessary. Yeah. And when we talk about the long haul, part of that is that this isn't a quick fix. This isn't a church growth principle or strategic, maneuver or technique. You really have to be patient. It really involves just taking our time and helping people reimagine, as I said, the missionary nature of the church, and then what are the implications for that as it relates to missionary formation and thinking and acting like a missionary. So the long haul kind of speaks to the fact that this isn't going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I think that's important because with church planners, we're a little bit like speedboats. We can turn around rapidly, but there's that old saying, if you want to turn a tanker around, it takes a lot of time, and it's not like turning a speedboat around. It's going to take a lot more minutes to do that. So,
and that's one of the things Paul talked about. Paul talked about the patience of an apostle, and that just doesn't ride well with most of us. We don't want that patience thing. And of course, Jesus talked about the yeast of the kingdom. Let it go in, and you don't see results for a while, and you're like, why? In fact, I was talking with some guys earlier today about in this missional movement at this point. One of the problems that's kind of starting to really raise its head, especially with the denominations and church planting networks and things that are doing funding, they're used to seeing quick results. They're wanting, like, hey, let's launch this thing, let's make it happen. In 18 months, you've got X amount. Well, that doesn't necessarily happen until later if you're really going full-born, making disciples in a missional orientation. But then the exponential curve is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But it just takes patience. To whether it's turning a church around or it's starting as a church planter.
And that's important because what I like about this book is it takes a long view. It's actually many church planters start off, they plant and they become the church that they left. And because they grow suddenly in size, and Brad, they don't have what you're talking about, those theological roots. They haven't rethought. They've simply started out new and fresh, and they haven't actually thought through. And that's a huge danger to a church planter, that he can start off, if he hasn't thought theologically, gone to the very foundation,
absolutely,
being careful how he builds, then Paul says, I laid a foundation like a wise and master builder. You can just build and lay a foundation and not give much thought to it and just reproduce what you've come from, which prompted you to plant in the first place.
Right. A lot of times the way we frame that is that too often as church planters, we start with ecclesiology, and we really believe we need to start with theology and missiology, and then let our ecclesiology really be birthed out of that, especially in light of a very rapidly changing culture we all live. Our contexts are very different, so we just have to start with those theological foundations, let that inform our missiology, and then let the church be shaped and formed out of there.
That's awesome. So you can get the Missional Quest. You can get this pretty much Amazon.
Right.
Where else is a good place to?
Well, IVP, they're on their website. They've got it for a good price, and they've got electronic versions of it.
Barnes and Noble
Right.
online.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah, CBD, all that.
All
yeah.
right,
Yep.
man.
And then we've
Excellent.
got a companion website that we really have looked at this as we built a training system out of it too. So we have a companion
cool.
website that tells a little bit more about it and about these one-day things that we offer. That are some training opportunities built around it.
That's cool because you guys are, what's good is you're not just guys sitting in an ivory tower, dreaming stuff up. You're practitioners. You've got a lot of experience training people. So that's actually really exciting. What companion site is? What?
Yeah, it's missionalquest.com. Yeah,
Missionalquest.com.
Yeah.
All right. That's awesome. I'm going to go check that out. What I'm really excited about is what's coming up in Costa Mesa, the Centralized Conference.
Yeah.
So for people that aren't familiar with Centralized, first off, you spelled the name wrong. I don't know if you realize
we
that.
messed it up, but we were committed after we started.
So tell us about the name. Why Centralized? What's behind
You
the
see that? Are you doing a lower third or?
Well, we want to emphasize the word sent to begin with. Just, again, missio, meaning that it really relates to us being sent, both individually and collectively as the church. We like to say a lot of times that we wrongly assume that the primary activity of God is in the church, where the primary activity of God is actually in the world, and the church is an instrument created by God to be sent into the world and participate in what he's already doing.
Awesome.
So it's a play on that, just saying that we are a gathered and sent people of God.
Yeah,
love
it's that sentness that causes us to gather in the first place. So it's and so it is. It's a play on words, but it's kind of started making sense. We don't get as many people asking us, "You spelled it wrong."
Well, what's really cool is we were talking with Jeff Ennerstelt, and he was saying, he kept talking about how to him ministry was all about decentralizing. And I love the play on words there. That's actually what you're saying. You're doing a play on words.
Absolutely.
You're doing the opposite. You're decentralizing.
Right.
But I love the way you spell it. It's a killer idea. So, this is, to me, this is more impressive than Exponential's lineup. This is Alan Hirsch, Hugh Halter, Jen Hatmaker. Wow,
Yep.
dude.
Yeah, yeah.
Michael Frost. It's funny, huh? We're all excited about Jen Hatmaker, right?
Yeah, Michael
if
Frost.
you think that's girly, you just haven't been paying
That's
attention
all
to
right.
the blogosphere.
That's right.
Michael Frost, Caesar Kalinowski. I am saying it right.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was
yeah,
kind of
you-
paranoid
that
about
was
that.
really well
I
done,
interviewed him this
Caesar
morning
would
and
be
said I'm
glad.
saying
Yeah.
it right. Ephraim Smith, a guy couldn't pronounce his name, so I skipped him. Neil Cole, Dan Kimball, Leroy Barber, Deborah
Noah
Hirsch.
Castellano, CCDA president. So
Oh, right on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I skipped him because his name
Yeah,
was a
that's
little
why
bit
I thought
difficult
it,
too.
so.
Lance Ford, Matt Smay, Deborah Hirsch. If you're like, oh, but I want this guy there, I probably skipped him because his name was hard. Joey Turner, Brad Briscoe, Brandon Hatmaker. Who?
Yeah,
That's
well,
Jen's
we
husband.
got Jen, so we had to bring. No, we love Brandon.
No,
Brandon's
he's great,
brilliant.
man. Dave Runyon, he's on the cover of Church Planter magazine this month.
Oh, great.
Kim Hammond, Mike Katzenberger,
Katzenberger.
and Bo Crosetto from Release
Now,
8.
let me point this out too. Ori Brofman, you ever read Starfish and Spider? The book called Starfish and Spider.
I've seen it. Yeah, I have
it's
read
in New
that.
York.
Okay, that's Ori.
Best, Ori's just wonderful. So Ori's coming down from San Francisco, and Alan's going to do a real cool main session interviewing Ori, breaking down
Awesome.
that kind of flattened leadership type of stuff.
I had a missional leader in the UK actually email me an e-copy. I don't know how he got
Okay.
that. I think he knows him, but he emailed it to me and said, you got to read this thing.
Ori's great.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
Yeah, we're
So-
going to have a fun time.
This is going to be in Costa Mesa, January 23rd and 25th at Centralized West Coast. I'm going to be there, and I'm encouraging everybody I know to go to this thing.
Appreciate it.
I am super excited about this. I honestly, I'm excited to see all these guys on the back here. We've got Michael Frost, Dan Kimmel, and Alan Hirsch again. They're all talking about it. What do you guys hope to see at the end of this? Like, what's kind of the thrust of this conference?
You want to go?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. Kind of our motivation for it is kind of threefold. One, we just really believe that the whole missional conversation is so crucial, really for the future of the church in North America, that we really do this for really the dissemination of ideas. I mean, we want people to be captivated by the Missio Dei, by the mission of God, and how we are to engage in that. Secondly, we really want to elevate the voice of practitioners. So every speaker is really, at some level, is in the trenches getting it done. So like you use the metaphor of the ivory tower, we want people that are really practitioners and they're sharing their stories. And then the third thing, we really want networking to take place. I mean, we want the conference to act as a catalyst of sorts, of people to meeting other people, hearing their stories, finding out how they can partner with them, and really for it to play a small little piece or part of really of a movement across the country.
Yeah. One of the things that people always comment about Centralized, and we just finished the Mid-America one that we've done in Kansas City the last 3 years. We'll be doing in Dallas next year. But is the accessibility of the speakers too. We have no green rooms, and so all the speakers, and they want this anyway, but they're immediately after their sessions, they flock to the foyers, to right in the middle of the place, to be accessible and be able to, visit and more than rub shoulders, but be able to answer the questions that weren't in their talks and things like that. So it's like a tribal gathering, and whether it's your first time or not, you're going to feel at home there. You're going to feel welcome and part of more than just sitting in an audience.
I think if you're a church planter, the cool thing about coming to these conferences is a lot of times you can feel alone. You can feel like, man, nobody understands me, and I'm talking, everybody thinks I'm nuts out here. Right. And then you go to a conference like this, and you feel like, okay, I've found my tribe. These are my peeps.
We hear that all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. And then you've got people, and you bump into people, and you'll see the same people next year and all that kind of stuff. So that is very cool. How much is a conference?
Well, the best thing, to go to the website, centralizedconference.com. There's different, there's scales on students and groups and all of that.
Early
so the
bird
earlier you register, the better.
The worst case scenario is like $169, I think, if you wait too long. Right. Best case scenario is like $139. It's a bargain. I mean, it's great. So,
it's great. For these kind of speakers, to get this many speakers that you can be hearing from for that price, I mean, you're to be able to talk to them. You're going to be interacting. You're going to get some coaching and mentoring. If you take the time and talk, like, you guys are accessible. You're just hanging out here. Anyone can. I've watched people come up to Sorry.
Well, we love that.
I've watched people come up and talk to you guys, to talk to other people. And
we love that. And one of the things we do in the evenings, there's always a party. It will either be happening there or somewhere, but there's always together, and all the speakers, everybody's there. Awesome. It's just we're all one tribe, I mean, so it's about the kingdom and Jesus getting the glory, and we mean that. It's not just words. Yeah.
Amen. All right. Hey, we'll see you at Centralized.
Love it, man.
Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it.
God bless you guys.
Thanks.